Hello, everybody. It's me, Evan Grant from the Dallas Morning News. You're apparently, uh, if you've seen the social media card that our folks made up, you're kind of kooky uncle. I don't know that I've ever made that face, but it's your sassy dad joke telling, baseball covering, sitting in front of Art, Uncle Evan from Surprise. So I am in Surprise, Arizona. Ranger exhibition games are going to start tomorrow. So we'll actually get some competition. Nathan Eovaldi is going to start for the Rangers and will, in all likelihood, just go 2 innings. Um, they will play Kansas City. They will see a lot of Kansas City this spring, as they do every spring. And the evaluation process will start. Before I get to questions, I'll just very quickly say, look, the first 10 days have gone about as well as you could hope. Rangers have tried to avoid any serious injuries. That's what you try to do when pitchers aren't facing hitters in games, and batters aren't having to run the bases really at full speed. So that's been good. There are some lingering issues with some minor league relievers like Mark Church and Emiliano Teodo. They'll be behind, but none of the guys on the big league team or guys who you expect to be real contributors to the big league team have had any issues. And for your sake, Ranger fans, I'll knock on wood my head. Um, the other thing is that the first 10 days, I think, were all about culture, establishing culture, talking about communication, watching how the players interact with manager Skip Schumacher, how the coaches interact with the players, how Schumacher interacts with the coaches. And I think there really is a good level of collaboration here, good communication for the time being. As I've qualified this with other people that I've talked to, you know, if you didn't bring in a new manager, if you did bring in a new manager and you didn't have good energy and good vibes the first 10 days of camp, you'd really be doing something wrong. So I don't know if at this point in time, if the culture shift is going to be a long-term thing. Certainly all indications are that it's been very positive, but I think that for the time being, the Rangers have met their goal. Let's just put it that way. Um, I'd love to get to questions if we've got any. I hope you guys have got some stuff to offer. Um, if not, I will keep talking because I don't want to just have dead air. Um, is there anything that anybody in particular wants to know, though, before I get into that? Nobody's answering me. All right. So I'll go over a couple things real quick that I feel like that I feel like are things that need to be addressed in games. The Rangers need to get um, better better answers to. Here we go. We've got some questions. I needed to find the public chat. As usual, it's user operator error. Um, Steven wants to know if you've heard whether the Rangers are looking into signing Joey Gallo as a pitcher. Could make a great homecoming. And look, I think I wrote this last week when the Rangers signed Jordan Montgomery to a 1 year deal, even though he won't be ready until mid July at the earliest. That, yeah, this organization and its fans certainly love a homecoming story. Um, and Joey, having switched last year from hitting to pitching, kind of did that, I want to say, late in the year. Um, Ranger fans would love a nice homecoming. I just don't see it happening at this moment. Certainly, Joey going and being a pitcher is a project. I've seen some clips that he's shared of some of his bullpens, um, but I don't know that the Rangers are in position right now where they want to take a real flyer on, I think Joey's over 30 now. I think he's 31 or 32. I don't know that they want to take a flyer on a guy who probably have to go to extended spring and maybe Class A before they get any real sense of where he stood as a pitcher. So I think that's not really on the front burner for this club right now. But when you've got connections to a player, as the Rangers do with Joey, um, certainly that possibility always exists. And I think we've seen that this organization is willing to turn over every stone to find potential talent. Thanks for that question, Stephen. Here's my good friend Bill Flanagan once again. God love you, Bill, for being a constant watcher and listener. Um, Seems like the rotation and the starting lineup leave little guesswork, and I agree with you on that, Bill. And I'm actually writing a roster projection for tomorrow going into camp. But your question here is, what should we look for in camp? And I hope to answer some of those questions um, in that roster projection. But obviously, the biggest question I think for how this team is going to be put together is what happens with Jacob Latz and Kumar Rocker as far as the starting rotation goes. If Kumar is ready to move into the rotation, if the Rangers believe that he's ready to move into the rotation, then it allows them to put Jacob Latz in the bullpen, and it strengthens their bullpen, gives them that depth option at the back of the rotation, and it potentially preserves Jacob as a potential fill-in starter if need be. If Kumar has trouble using his changeup or throwing all of his pitches to the same place, if that persists, then you probably move Latz into the rotation, and then you're still searching for another arm. And with, in all likelihood, it shuffles who will be the leverage guys in the bullpen, because if Jake Latz is in the bullpen, he's going to pitch in some kind of leverage role, whether it's a 2-inning type setup guy or as the potential closer. But you're going to have to then shuffle some roles in the back end of the bullpen. And Skip Schumacher talked a lot about this morning when we were kind of talking about the art of roster construction, and that is a moving piece. So what happens with Jake and Kumar in the rotation is going to be a key element. There is one other wild card element to this, providing everybody stays healthy as far as the rotation goes. If the Rangers really like how this bullpen looks with Jacob Latz in it, providing somebody like Cal Quantrill or Austin Gombert has a good spring, and the Rangers get continuing good reports that Cody Bradford is getting close to being ready, that potentially gives them, the Rangers, a short-term option for the back end of the rotation for April, with the hope that Cody Bradford is ready to step in come May. All things considered, look, I think this team wants and would like for Kumar Rocker to win that job in the starting rotation. He was the number 3 pick in the draft. He is the same age as Jack Leiter. He should be in position, after all he's been through and to be healthy now, to win a job in the rotation. And if he does that, I think it sets this team up best for success all over. If he doesn't, I don't see Kumar going into the bullpen mix. I don't see him becoming a reliever out of the gate, but I certainly think that then you get to a point potentially at midseason that you do look at the possibility of, okay, would Kumar's stuff then play better as a back end reliever? But before you get there, you want to roll out as much as you can with starting rotation opportunities. Thanks for that question again, Bill. Another good one. From Robin. Hey, Evan, the influencer, how's Carter's wrists feeling? I've heard our manager say it's hard to come back from the first year. Yeah, we've asked Skip Schumacher about Josh Young and the wrist because he had two surgeries on that in 24, um, and that those were, I want to say, more um, invasive procedures on his wrist. When he got hit at the start of the 24 season, I think that they said that um, there were multiple fractures in that wrist, and that took a lot of tricky surgical procedure to fix. Haven't talked with him in relation to specifically to Carter about the wrist after he got hit last year, uh, and suffered a similar fracture. Not the same kind of fracture, but a fracture. Um, I do feel like the Rangers think that Evan Carter has come into camp stronger. They feel like he is healthy. Um, Hopefully for him, his back issues are now under control. And I think they'd like to give him the opportunity to win the center field job. I think one of the key things I'm going to look for, and I highlight this in tomorrow's column, which I'm giving you a preview to right now, is they will give Evan Carter the opportunity to face as many lefties as they possibly can in the spring to get a better feel for where he is against lefties, because that's going to ultimately determine a lot of things in the outfield. If Carter isn't comfortable against lefties, if he doesn't show progress against lefties, then you have to consider him being in more of a platoon role, which probably then focuses you more towards a corner, and maybe you move Wyatt Langford, because I think you'd rather have an everyday center fielder than a platoon center field situation. So I think that's where the Rangers would go. I don't know that that's a definitive, but I think that's where things would go. Hang on, I'm getting a message, everybody. Oh, everything was okay. It was. Does everybody here like get Slack from the office? Do you hate Slack? Wish we could do a show of hands. Um, yeah, I just feel like I'm constantly connected to the world. Um, anyway, so let's get back onto questions. Uh, Steve, how much runway do you think Josh Jay, and Jake Burger get to prove themselves this year? Steve asks. Uh, well, I think that in each case it's a little bit different. I mean, Jock is in the second year of a high dollar contract, and he's in his mid 30s. And if he doesn't get off to a good start, I could see a situation where this team divests itself from him fairly early into the year. I do feel like last year was humbling in a lot of ways for him, and I do feel like he's come into the camp motivated, in a better place, headspace. I do feel like he's in a little bit better shape. I mean, physically, he's slimmed down by 15 or 20 pounds. He looks good, um, compared to where he was every year. But you should look good when you come to camp. So I don't expect this year to be as bad as it was last year. But if he gets off to a rotten start, for lack of a better term, I think there's a chance, the Rangers cut bait on him rather early. In the case of in the case of Josh Young, I think it's a little bit interesting. In that I wrote about this for this morning. We talk about Josh Smith being in the competition for a second base job, and clearly all of that makes sense because they now have an opening at second base with Marcus Semien departing in the trade. But if you look at Josh Smith's numbers over the last 2 years, he's had more at bats, played more games, um, accumulated a higher WAR than Josh Young. And so the question for me is, if Josh Smith is in competition at second base, should not Josh Young be in competition at third base? And, if Josh Smith is in competition He's in competition probably with Ezekiel Duran and probably with Cody Freeman. And I would think that those same guys would figure into the mix at third base as well. And also, you've got this possibility you know, if the Rangers feel like they're better off defensively with Josh Smith at third base, if he outperforms Young and the other two guys also outperform Young, maybe you end up with a situation where you end up with a guy like Duran playing second base and maybe Smith plays third. There's a lot of different ways the Rangers could align that. I do think that Josh Young deserves a little bit of grace coming out of the gates here. I don't think that he should necessarily lose third base based on spring training. We just talked about the wrist issues, and we were talking about a comment that Marcus Semien made after Josh had that first wrist surgery in 24, and how it took 2 years for him, for Marcus, to really feel recovered after that surgery. And I think that applies to Josh. Certainly, there was some scar tissue and some mobility range probably impacted with his wrist, and that took some time getting used to. And as Skip Schumacher said yesterday when we asked about this, about the process of getting better performance a second year out from surgery, his response was, look, as a baseball player, I think you'd rather get hit in the face than hit in the hand, because your hands those are your money makers. And so that's going to be interesting to see. I do think he deserves a little bit of grace on that. But I think that there are some wild card situations that could arise that make the Rangers at least think about the possibility of what if they move forward without Young as their everyday third baseman. I think that really cuts his potential value down, and you've clearly at that point moved on from a number one draft pick. So I think there's a lot of reasons for the Rangers to kind of watch this play out. But I think also it could be a rather short leash. How short of a leash? Is it that short or is it shorter? I don't know. But I think that is something that Josh is going to have to prove this year, that he is healthy and is got a better plate approach. Jake Burger, listen, what I would say is, if you go back and look at Jake's numbers after he came back in mid-August, he finished pretty strong. That's not to say that he doesn't have a short leash, but with the Rangers trading Abimelec Ortiz in the Mackenzie Gore deal, there's not really a regular first baseman in waiting in the minor league system. Justin Foskey will take some ground balls at first base, and he's also going to take some balls in the outfield, manager Skip Schumacher said. And look, this is a guy who also was a first-round draft pick and got to prove his worth. So, it doesn't matter where you play Foskey. He's going to be an average at best fielder. He's got to rake. And if he rakes, then maybe the Rangers think about some things. But I think Jake Burger has the most runway of any of those three. He's got a recent track record having played for Skip in Miami in 24 that even Josh Young didn't have in terms of production. I think if you look at Burger's 24 versus Young's last full year of 23 ahead, we're saying that 25 was an outlier. If you go back to Young's 23 season, I think Burger's 24 numbers are better than that. I know that's very convoluted, and I don't know why you put up with me, but thank you for doing so. So I would think he's got the longest leash of that group. But yeah, I think where the offense is concerned, and this is a huge question, right? This is a huge question for this team. Those three guys it's a critical year for all three. One in terms of his long-term future with the Rangers, the other in terms of his career. So those are significant issues. And then Carson piggybacks off that and asks about Josh's future in the organization. Look, I think it still could be very bright, but I think that this is a year he's got to prove himself. Uh, I also think the second part of your question is Young's time here tied with Walcott after he recovers from Tommy John, since Walcott can also play third base. I ultimately think Sebastian Walcott's going to end up in the outfield. It's just my gut. When you talk to evaluators and everything, that's they talk about him profiling as more as an outfielder. So I don't know that the two are tied close together. And certainly, if Josh is productive and Sebastian comes back strong from the surgery, there's certainly room for the Rangers to have two accomplished players. But I think that right now the Rangers are leaning towards Walcott eventually moving to the outfield if he moves. That said, if the Rangers do move on from Josh Young, clearly it opens a path at third base for Walcott long term. Thanks for that question, Carson. I'm going to assume you're not Carson Beck. If you are, tough break on a national championship game, but also you never should have left Georgia. Okay, there, I said it. Is there a player that's caught your eye already this spring? Someone that could surprise us? Yeah, Jack, there is. And I mean, Sean McFarland, who's out here with me, is writing a little piece. It may even be up already about Gavin Collier, right-handed pitcher, who I think has had the most impressive set of bullpens and live BP. I watched him throw live BP the other day with a big group of people around him, and his first pitch was 98 and looked effortless. He hit 99, but he also backed it up with a really nice cutter at 94 miles an hour, with good spin, and a slider that was 87 to 89. So it was a good three-pitch mix. The problem with Collier in the past has been walks, and so if he's what I saw that day in live batting practice, and he faced, live batting practice is about pitchers more than it is about hitters, but he faced actual big league hitters in that. He was around the zone. I didn't see him scatter a bunch of pitches that were clearly balls out of his hand. He looked around the zone, and if he can do that, and he can cut down the walk rate, I think there's a very good path for him to really make an impact on this year's team. I think it's hard for him to win a job out of spring training, especially with a Rule 5 pick in camp and Carter Baumler, who's also had a fine spring. I just feel like Gavin, especially with Mark Church and Emiliano Teodo both down, I do think that Gavin has a chance to get a leg up on being the first option when the Rangers go look for a high octane arm in the farm system. The other guy on my radar a little bit has been catcher Willie McIver, and look, he's a third catcher at this point in time. I don't see him making the big league roster, but this whole first 2 weeks has been about culture and enthusiasm and energy, and he's been as enthusiastic and energetic as anybody, and Skip Schumacher singled him out. So those are two guys that caught my eye. I think I've mentioned this both in a column and here just a few minutes ago. I do think that Jock Peterson's change in his physical condition is also worth noting. So those are the three things from these first 10 days. For me, the first 10 days are always just about, can you get healthy? And if you've got a message, and this really only goes with a new coaching staff or something that needs to really be singularly addressed. Like a few years ago when Mike Maddox came back as a pitching coach in 2023, the Rangers had been a poor fielding team. And Mike and Mike's brother Greg won, I think, 17 Gold Gloves, and most ever by a pitcher. Greg was in camp, and I think that the Rangers really stressed during those first 10 days PFP, and it paid off. They were a much better fielding team at pitching, and they have remained so. I do think there's been some time and energy stressed on improving the running game, and that is on pitchers doing a better job of giving their catchers an opportunity to throw out runners. We won't see how that plays out until spring training, though, until games start. So I do think that the Rangers have talked to their pitchers and have asked them to show varying looks. I need to mention Kumar Rocker too. One thing about Kumar that stood out to me is he wore a PitchCom communicator on his belt during a live BP session, which is really unheard of because you're usually pitchers are given their signs that they want to the catcher right away. There's no reason to have to hide signals at that point. Um, but I think Kumar wants to use the PitchCom thing, and I think this all goes to him being a little bit more decisive in how he's going to go about things. In that live BP session, using the PitchCom communicator, he was able to, in his mind, kind of like go fast. He likes to have he walks slow, but he has a fast tempo on the mound. And I think that will allow him to do that on the mound. The second thing was in that live BP, he threw a number of changeups. It was only, I think, like a 25 pitch BP, and he threw 4 changeups to lefties. I didn't count the number to righties, but it would be a much more effective pitch to the lefties for him, down and in to the lefties. I think that I talked to Sam Haggerty, who faced him from the left-hand side, and Sam said, I wasn't even sure that he had a changeup because he threw it so little last year, but it was an effective changeup on those couple of pitches. We'll be watching for that during his outings in spring. So there is this question from J. Bryce Perry. Thank you for saying these have been great. I appreciate that. But you ask if this team's offensive strategy appears to be built mostly on hope, particularly hope that Young, Berger, Jock, and Carter will just be significantly better than last year. Am I wrong? Yes and no would be my answer. Look, if you based off of last year, it's not a sound strategy. I think what the Rangers are basing things off of is that Young had a strong 23, got hurt in 24, really struggled in 25. They feel like the player who they saw at 23 is more truly who he is. Berger had good 23 and 24 seasons. He struggled last year. And I don't want to make excuses for Jake, but remember, he had a child born with Down syndrome about a month before he was traded to the Rangers. 3 months in, and basically his first 2 weeks with the Rangers, he had to go home for his daughter's open heart surgery. He and his wife put together a foundation for Down syndrome and to raise awareness and funds for Down syndrome research and support. And so Andy was on a new team. And as we've talked about just a little bit, that clubhouse dynamic was a little bit awkward because guys were just going in different directions. So I think there was a lot on his plate last year, both life and baseball. And obviously he didn't do it, but I think he's produced in 23 and 24. Carter, I think the Rangers feel like, I think there's some hope involved there. The hope being that he can make progress against lefties. And in the minor leagues, he was able to walk against lefties. He was able to walk against them some, but he wasn't able to hit lefties in the minor leagues either. So that one I need to see to believe, and I think that's a big part of the spring training. And Jock, the same thing applies with Berger, only Jock has a longer track record of being a productive player. So, I mean, I think it's based in some reality, but also, the hope that, or even if we're talking about hope or probabilities, the probability of all 4 of those guys really bouncing back and having average to above average seasons or above career norms, I think you're not going to get all 4 of them. If you get 3, is that enough to make this offense go? Maybe. Depends on a lot of other things. I do think there are some areas this year where, because of the Rangers' self-imposed financial constraints, that they are relegated to hoping a little bit on things. not to say that they're wrong. And look, I mean, I think Sean and I have both touched on this, that they've done a great job the last 2 years rebuilding the bullpen on the fly with inexpensive arms. They were forced to try and do it this year. I think they would have preferred to go out and get a closer. They were forced to do it this year based on the restraints ownership put on them on baseball operations, and so they're once again trying to rebuild the bullpen on the cheap. What are the chances that you're able to do that 3 years in a row with new faces? Gets riskier and riskier. It's risky in the bullpen from year to year. It's riskier when you're going for to identify bargains, and it's risky to think that all of them will be successful. So, yeah, that's a real question. Um, Charles asks, when Bradford comes in, could they consider a six-man rotation if Rocker is rocking it? I think more likely in that situation, the Rangers would have Cody Bradford work out of the bullpen in a longer role, And I think again, if this team needs to get off to a good start, and if this team intends to go to the postseason, um, it's got to be it's got to protect its starting pitching as much as possible. Now, you can argue that the six-man rotation would do that, but I also, the way the schedule has fallen the last couple of years and breaks up, it's pretty easy to keep guys on reasonably easy or reasonable to keep guys on 5 days rest a lot of the time without having to go to a six-man rotation. Could you drop somebody in? Yeah, I think you could drop Jacob Latz or Cody Bradford, and the Rangers ended up doing that kind of thing a decent number of times last year. So I think more likely Cody or Jake would become kind of that swing guy. But Cody also pitched out of the bullpen effectively when he was here before getting hurt. So I think that is more likely what I would see if Kumar is really, as you say, rocking it, and if the rotation is healthy and effective. But we'll see also how that plays out. I feel like I'm saying we'll see a lot, and I hate when I do that. But until Cody Bradford is back from his elbow brace repair, his elbow brace, internal brace surgery, which the Rangers hope would be sometime in late May. I think that well, it could be early to mid-May. I think the hope is that if everything continues to go well, that when the Rangers break camp to go to Arlington and start the season. Well, they start the season in Philadelphia. You know what I mean? There's 2 exhibition games in Arlington. I don't want anybody to think I'm not factual. But when they break camp and the minor league season start, it's possible that Cody could go out on a rehab. I would expect that to be a full 30-day rehab. But that's a possibility. And if he does that around that time, it puts him potentially as a factor come early May. I'm not even going to say your name, but last name is Fool. So that's your handle. Nobody's a fool on here, except for me. You ask do I feel like this lineup will produce runs? And my only answer for this is I think they'll be better than they were last year. I think you had so many guys who were not productive last year, and so many guys who got into deep spirals, chasing numbers and trying to get back on good footing, that it just continued to be a downward spiral for this offense. I think this offense will be more effective out of the gate. Is it a top 10 offense? I don't know. Because, as we said, you're talking about a number of guys that don't have real proven track records. You're asking for Corey Seager to still be Corey Seager and post something 850 to 900 or above OPS. You're asking Wyatt Langford to take the next step and go to an 800 or 800 plus OPS guy. I think they'll score more runs than they did last year. They have to score more runs than they did last year. Will it be enough? Will the improvement be enough? I think that is, largely contingent on young Carter having rebound years and taking steps forward if not all the way to, above average, getting back to closer to career norms. Benny Bullock, frequent commenter on Twitter, asked me, if Baumler, Collier, and Alstrom all look good throughout spring training, does that make one of the veteran relievers expendable or tradable? Well, I don't know that you've got real tradable pieces in the bullpen. I mean, all of these guys that you added were pretty much free agents signed this offseason. I think there's a way. The only thing I can tell you, Benny, at this point is I think there's a way for Baumler, Collier, and Alstrom, for at least for one of them, to push their way into the bullpen. I don't think all three. I mean, it's out. There's even a route to get two of them, but I don't think all three could get in there. You've got to keep some optionable arms at the back end of in your bullpen so that you can shuffle guys around when need be. But as we just talked about, this bullpen was a weakness last year, and I think the Rangers are going to bet on track records first before they start to go with unproven. Because look, let me just remind you that I think it was 23 Rangers first spring training. Jonathan Hernandez was lights out in spring training, dominant, and basically went into the season, as one of the guys who was going to close games, and he didn't last through April. So my point is, I think the Rangers are going to protect the maximum number of assets here, and they're guys who are optionable, like Collier and Alstrom, and right, Collier is not even on the 40-man roster at this point in time, so you have to create a 40-man spot for him, and the same applies for Rowdy Alstrom. So I think that maybe one of those guys can make it. I don't think both can, and so that's where we stand on that. I've got now, because I'm so slow on this, we've got some people confirming to me that yes, Slack is awful and annoying. It's not awful. It's just that I feel completely tethered to my computer at all times as I speak into my computer to you right now. Rum drums. Sometimes when me and John Blake on the Rangers podcast, we used to talk about Rangers pitchers who were just kind of like zero WAR players, replacement type players, or were bad pitchers. And that name really hasn't come up very much recently, but in the early 2000s it did a lot. And the name for those kinds of pitchers was rum dums, just an average rum dum. So I don't know what rum drums means, but maybe there is rum involved, maybe a pina colada. Anyway, the question is any chance of Rowdy Tellez coming back? I haven't seen any news of him signing. He's unsigned right now. He's going to play for Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic. He'll join Team Mexico on March 1. I think it would make some sense for the Rangers to bring him back because, as we said, I don't see what their first base depth is in the minor league system right now, having traded Abimelec Ortiz. I also thought Rowdy was good in the clubhouse, and you're certainly good for Cody Freeman. He really took Cody Freeman under his wing. I think, it makes some sense. I also think the Rangers looked unathletic last year, and even though Rowdy is just a big-bodied guy, I think there was some thought that just kind of played into that narrative, that this is an unathletic team that can't be aggressive enough on the field. I think what will happen is Rowdy will go to the World Baseball Classic. After that, there will be somebody who has a first base injury or has an opening for an insurance policy, and he'll sign them. I think some teams will want to see how he fares in that first round of the WBC. Mexico will face the USA, so he'll face a strong pitching staff in spring training and get some quality at bats in that game. But yeah, I'd like to see him come back, and I believe Rowdy lives in in the area. I think he lives maybe Frisco, Plano, Salina, Prosper, somewhere up there. So I think it makes sense from a geographical standpoint as well. It's easy for him to be close to home. Uh, Makes just sense for a minor league deal. So we'll see where that goes. I don't know if Rowdy is holding out hope that he'd get a major league contract if somebody gets hurt, but uh, I think before it's all over with, he'll sign with somebody. Um, Jack Brown. Can you already tell an energy difference from Bochy to Skip? Well, it's funny. Um, as I said, I think the energy in camp is good, and I think the energy of a 70-year-old who's got a bad gait is going to be different than a 45-year-old who this morning when I asked him is if there's one song that you listen to when you need to get pumped up, what is it? Um, he said, I idle at 60. It's not really an issue for me. So, yeah, he's more energetic and more active than Boch. He was out on they were doing some PFPs on one field and they were short a second baseman and he was taking ground balls. Boch just physically can't do that at this point in time. So, yeah, there's an energy and difference in how they approach things. Um, I will just say that the whole purpose of my question about that was I needed to get pumped up a little bit this morning. Been here 11 days, starting to get a little repetitive. That's why games are good to start. And so I put on Badlands by Bruce Springsteen, which always gets me fired up. I asked Skip. He didn't really have an answer. He said he listens to Disturbed when he works out. I don't know what that says, but there you go. With a need for more contact hitting, will the team pursue specific free agents to improve the lineup? I don't think they're going to pursue any more free agents for this lineup. Mark Canha, who they signed to a minor league deal last week or over the weekend, that pretty much does it. They were looking for a right-handed bat who could maybe take some DH bats and be a right-handed pinch hitter off the bench. Hopefully that guy could play some outfield, and that's what Canha is. I also think the Rangers aren't necessarily looking to just have more contact. I think they're just looking to have a better approach. The thing that really stuck out last year was the number of chases that the Rangers had. I hate to single out Josh Young, but that was a real issue for him. I think it was a big issue for Adolis Garcia, and he's no longer here. It was a big issue for Jonah Heim, and he's no longer here. So I do think that they addressed it by going out and getting Nimmo, who is a high OBP guy, by putting Josh Smith into the lineup, who is a high OBP or expected to be a higher OBP guy with really good bat to ball skills. And I think that they hope that Josh Young and Jake Burger both make a little bit of progress in that regard as well. So they're not going to be the 1985 St. Louis Cardinals. And I know I'm dating myself with a reference that's 41 years old, but they're not going to be, put the ball in play speed team. They are going to hit for some power, and they are going to have some strikeouts. I think they can strike out a little bit less than last year, and I think that they can improve the quality of their contact. I think they made contact enough last year. I think they can improve the quality of their contact, and that's a big project for spring. Janet chimes in that Josh Young has a stronger arm and better range than Smith. He has shown he's a really good third baseman. Josh is a really good defensive third baseman, and in the column today that I wrote about possibility for competition at third base, I singled that out. Josh had one of the 5, I think, highest defensive quotient numbers according to Fangraphs last year among third basemen. So he's a really good defensive third baseman. There's no doubt about that. I would not take anything. He may have a stronger arm than Smith, but I think Smith's got great range really anywhere he plays. And I do think that, look, this team is a better team if Josh Young is the third baseman and Josh Smith is playing second base. But I don't rule out the possibility that if Josh has a poor spring, um, something something happens eventually. Benny, I'm back to Benny. Do the Rangers have more players on their roster whose names start with the letter J than any other team? It's funny also, Benny, I was thinking about this today because I was writing something in regards to this roster, and I had Jacob Latz in the bullpen, Jake Berger at first base, obviously Jacob DeGrom at in the starting rotation, and Jacob Junis also in the bullpen. That's 4 Jakes. It's a lot of Jakes. And then you start factoring the Joshes, the Josh Young and Josh Smith, which is confusing enough half of the time. But yeah, I wonder if the Rangers will set a major league record for most guys named Jacob as their official given first name on opening day. I mean, 4 is a lot. So there you go. I do want to get to this real quick. I'm skipping around just for a minute. The real Ben Kaysen said that Tom Verducci today reported that Carter is likely to get everyday play this year instead of the platoon. Is that the buzz you're hearing? And I saw this clip from Tom today, and he referenced that Chris Young would love for Evan Carter to be the everyday center fielder. And when I read that, it struck me as a little bit more profound, I thought, than anything Chris had said about the subject previously. But then I went back to our story on the top storylines of spring training. I want to read you what Chris Young said at that point in time when I asked him. He said, "We've thought about different ways to optimize our outfield. We love the options we have, but still haven't landed on a firm answer yet. We'd love to see Evan Carter be our everyday center fielder, play 130 games, and hit left-handers. We do think at some point his approach is going to allow him to do that, but some of it may have to be worked out in spring." And it just comes down to that. If it was a matter of both these guys are going to play every day, I think the Rangers feel like Wyatt's a potential Gold Glove left fielder and Evans a potential Gold Glove center fielder. And so, yeah, they would love for Evan Carter, and Evan prefers left field, even though he made some great catches in the ALCS in 2023 in left field. He prefers center field, and that's all understood. But he's got to get through this camp healthy, show that he's healthy, and he's got to show progress against left-handers. And I don't know if that will all be worked out in spring. I think it may be something that bleeds over into the season. Now, the tricky part you get to is if you go into the season and you decide we're not going to platoon our center fielder, so you move Carter to left and you have Langford playing center, but you give Carter some more reps occasionally against left-handers, and he starts to show you progress against left-handers. Do you then go back at that point in time with the idea that Wyatt hopefully continues to take step forwards, and as he's approaching stardom, are you then going to say to Wyatt Langford, we're going to try and move you back to left field because we'd prefer Evan in center field? There's a whole lot of questions about how they ultimately arrive at that alignment. So that is, again, in my roster projection, that's one key thing I think the Rangers have to still work out is how they want to align those guys for all of these reasons. So thanks for that. Carson asks, I know Ray Davis is a reclusive man, but has there been any indication regarding his feelings of the team the last 2 years? I imagine he's not thrilled, but just curious. Yeah, you get a chance to talk to Ray sometimes at some of these events. He doesn't really talk on the record except for about once a year when we get a Q&A, when I get a Q&A with him. But yeah, he was unhappy. Look, when he hired Bruce Bochy, he said he wanted skins on the wall, and he said Bruce Bochy had skins on the wall. I think he's been unhappy with the performance, but and I think the plausible reason from a baseball standpoint that maybe there was this rollback in finances is Ray felt like there was too much wasted money the last 2 years, and he's demanding that the Rangers be a little bit more efficient. Now, be that as it may, I ultimately I think he wanted to get under the cap, and he was uncomfortable being near the cap in the first place. I think he wanted to get further under the cap than uh, you or I would have expected. Um, I think there's also every possibility that Ray is waiting to see how his spending is going to be impacted by the labor negotiations that are upcoming after the season. And that's going to be a really complicated, difficult situation to navigate through, because it's clear the owners want a salary cap. It's clear the players believe that's a non starter. And you're going to get to situations where if one side wants that, if the owners are bound and determined to get a salary cap, I wouldn't be surprised if the players propose, if you want that, then we want a year earlier of free agency, or 2 years of free agency uh, earlier. So it could really change the dynamics of the game. But I do think there's some element of that Ray is not thrilled about going out and signing long-term contracts right now, not knowing what the economic element of baseball will be in 27. And listen, the one other thing is, you've seen these cost valuations of franchises just skyrocket in the NBA, the NFL. There's cost certainty there thanks to the salary caps. I think that baseball owners don't have that same kind of cost certainty, and I think it inhibits their cash valuations for their franchises from going up the way they'd like them to. Those are billionaire problems. I know it's not any of our concern, but I do think that that's one of the reasons that owners would like to have a salary cap, so that they can do a better job of having some fixed costs, even if it is, a salary cap that might ultimately look like, for a lot of teams, it's not reachable. Um, but that's going to be played out by people. Well, not Tony Clark, that's for sure. It won't be played out by him, but it's going to be played out by people with a lot more expertise in labor and law than me. So, and you didn't even ask about um, labor. I'm sorry. Uh, Rum Drum's coming back. We're going to have to wrap up here in a few minutes. This has been great, man. This has been great. You guys, the questions today have been outstanding. But Rum Drums asks, have you tried the Au Poivre burger at Knox Bistro? Best fancy burger in town. Look, I don't know if you guys are aware, I'm branching out. My beat coverage is baseball, but I've started doing a burger project for the Morning News in January, and you can still find it online. If you haven't read it, and if you haven't, shame on you. So go read it. But I did my 5 favorite burgers of living in Dallas, kind of as a baseline for this project that is going to be a monthly list curated towards some kind of theme or ingredients, or occasion for people to find burgers in town. And we're starting out with Dallas proper, because look, if I tried to do this for all of North Texas or for our Net Texas, for DFW, I'm heavy already. My cardiologist would not be happy. Let's put it that way. So we're trying to start it out in Dallas. To answer your question, I haven't been to Knox Bistro to try their Au Poivre burger. Was going to try and get to Frenchie to try their Au Poivre burger in Preston Center right before I left for spring training. Did not get that opportunity. The February list for burgers is going to be out in the next week, and that list is affordable burgers. So it's going to be 5 burgers for $10 or less that you can get in Dallas. There will be other $10 burgers beyond just my list, but these are 5 that I really enjoyed that I found for under $10. And in March, we're hoping to do sports bars, kind of in conjunction with March Madness. But if you've got great suggestions for sports bars, email them to me at egrant@dallasnews.com. I'd love to hear it. So we're wrapping this stuff up. Charles says that the '85 Cardinals were a fun team to watch. They absolutely were. And then last question. All right, this is a good ender. The real Ben Kaysen wants to know, what was covering the Ian Kinsler for Prince Fielder trade like? I was 13, was absolutely stunned by the deal. Was it the most shocking Ranger trade you've covered? The most shocking Ranger trade I've covered. Yeah, I mean, it was. It really was. Did not see that forthcoming. But remember, at that point in time, the Rangers had broached the subject with Ian Kinsler about moving to first base to make room for Jurickson Profar at second base. Kinsler had initially said he would be willing to talk about it, and then later came back to the Rangers and said no, he wasn't. And look, Ian Kinsler made a reputation as a really good defensive second baseman, and it wasn't his job to move to accommodate a prospect. And so I understand where Ian was coming from. The organization thought, well, this is a way to get two great players on the field at the same time. As it was, it took Jurickson Profar time to get back from his injuries and whatnot to establish himself as a contributing and valuable big league player. So yeah, I thought it was a shocking trade. I do know that the Rangers had interest in Fielder when he was a free agent. I'll tell you a funny story here. This is how we used to be able to report. Not anymore, but I got a tip that the Rangers were meeting with Fielder. I think it was at the Four Seasons in Las Colinas. And I called, and I just took a guess. I took a guess that Scott Boras had registered under his own name for this meeting. And so I asked for Scott Boras's room. They rang me through. The person who picked up the phone was somebody from the Rangers front office who I knew. I said by name. I said my name and that I was calling to see if they were meeting with Fielder. And the person then said, "You have the wrong number." Very politely, he said, "You have the wrong number. I'm going to hang up now," which was my way of confirming that, in fact, the Rangers were in the room with Scott Boras at the time. Didn't end up leading to a contract, but nevertheless, there was interest in Fielder previously, and the Rangers thought they were getting a smart hitter, a high on base guy. Remember, that's the same winter they went out and got Shin-Soo Choo because they wanted more disciplined hitters at the plate. Kinsler was a pretty disciplined hitter. I think his discipline even got better later in age, but they wanted somebody to be able to open the path for Profar to play second base. As it turned out, Profar got hurt, and Rougned Odor ended up taking over at second base before the 2014 season had come to a close. And that, submission from our producer Joey. Yu Darvish getting traded what felt like 15 minutes after the trade deadline in 17 was interesting. It was interesting, and I'll leave you guys with one last funny story. You know, I was the week that Darvish got traded was also the Hall of Fame weekend. Pudge Rodriguez got inducted into the Hall of Fame, so I was in Cooperstown that weekend, and I couldn't be in the clubhouse, so I couldn't monitor anything going up to the deadline, and so I would tweet things about close to 3 o'clock, still no Darvish trade, because I thought that Darvish was going to get traded. I think it was a heartbreaker for a lot of people that period was ending, but I think it was a foregone conclusion after the Rangers had, right? They had already traded Hamels, and they were moving on. They had traded Jonathan LaCroix over the weekend of that too, and I kept tweeting stuff. And you read my tweets. I said, like, there's 10 minutes to go until the trade deadline. No word on Yu Darvish, and he tweeted a selfie at me of him holding his Rangers cap at his locker, which I thought was great, comic relief for that moment. But yeah, that deal ended up getting made right at the absolute deadline. Um, and that closed that chapter in Rangers history. My God, we've spent an hour on this, and it feels like it went by in 15 minutes. Thank you so much for the questions. Just a reminder, if you're still here, please like our video. I should have said that up front. Please hit the like button on YouTube. If you aren't subscribing, if please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is completely free. Leave any other comments you want in the YouTube channel, in the file, in the comment section under the YouTube video. I'll try and respond to them as I can. Hopefully we will do this again at some point in time next week and make this a regular thing. Really pleased with how this has gone. Really pleased with the input I've gotten from y'all. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon. Baseball starts tomorrow. Games. We'll see you tomorrow afternoon.